What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network. This is our wide receiver 3 fantasy preview episode for 2023. Here to break it down with me, one of the top fantasy football rankers in the game, the odds maker, Sean Kerner. What's going on, Sean?
What's up? Obviously, I had to wear my Gabe Davis hat for today's pod, but what jersey are you rocking today? Is that, I can't tell. It's number 19?
Yep.
It's not Keyshawn Johnson.
Yeah,
though.
96 Keyshawn.
Oh, shit.
Just
Nice.
give me the damn ball.
It was that era. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the first football seasons I remember watching every game for a team. I remember seeing every Jets game because it was on. They were all on in New York. That was bad.
What,
1 in 15.
Curtis Martin wasn't on that team, was he?
Nah, that was a couple years later. That was once the Parcells are. This was still Rich Kotite. So this was Adrian Morrell. Adrian Morrell was the running back this year.
Wayne Corbett.
Yep, all those guys. Damn. I think they had Webster Slaughter.
Hell yeah.
it was ugly though. But this is we're gonna talk wide receiver threes, fantasy wide receiver threes, and beyond in this episode. So we'll kind of go through all of the guys that we're higher on in each tier. You know, the wide receiver 3, the wide receiver 4, the wide receiver 5, and beyond tier. But let me just give the ADP for the wide receiver 3, which is we're calling the 25 through 36. Over the last 2 weeks, Drake London, wide receiver 25, Deontay Johnson 26, Godwin 27, Michael Pittman 28, Christian Kirk 29, Mike Williams 30, Ayuk 31, Tyler Lockett 32, Mike Evans 33, Marquise Brown 34, Traylon Burks 35, and Jahan Dotson 36. Sean, I'll start with give me a guy you like to beat their ADP in this range.
I got to go with the future Hall of Famer Mike Evans here at wide receiver 33. I feel like this is ridiculous, and his ADP has definitely dropped since the last time I looked. And look, I realize it's hard to get too excited about Evans at this point in his career. But he's still only 29. He's going to turn 30 next month, so it's not like he's washed up yet. Going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield will obviously hurt, but it's not like Evans hasn't been playing his way into the Hall of Fame with, suspect quarterback play anyway. He posted wide receiver 1 numbers back in 2014 with Mike Glennon and Josh McCown under center. I don't think the quarterback drop-off is going to hurt him too much. They're still probably going to have to be pretty pass heavy. They might be more involved in some trailing game scripts. So I think the volume will still be there. And one thing about last year was, Tom Brady, was getting rid of it really quick at 2.45 seconds per throw, which is by far the fastest in the NFL. So that probably hurt Evans a little bit just because, Brady wasn't willing to hang in the pocket and wait for the play to develop with, Mike Evans downfield. So Baker Mayfield, he's much more willing to hang in the pocket, 2.82 seconds last year. And he's willing to throw into tight windows. So it could be a good match for him. Either way, wide receiver 33 is way too low for Evans, especially in best ball where you don't have to figure out which weeks he's going to go off. So in this range, I think Mike Evans sticks out for me.
Yeah. Where do you have him ranked? Just curious.
26.
Oh, okay.
But again, he's not going to be giving you consistent production. So I wouldn't necessarily draft him there, especially in redraft. But at 33, I would. Obviously, but again, he's better suited for best ball just because of the volatility. But either way, 33 is way too low. And to be clear, we're using best ball ADPs, so you can get him wide receiver 3 in best ball.
Yeah, I have him right. I'm kind of in line with him just for now. I need to see. I mean, if Kyle Trask wins the job, I don't know what to expect. Baker, I think at least we'd have some history. Yeah. But that's kind of why he's sitting there. I'm in line with him for now. I just think there is kind of a concern, but at the same time, this dude has never posted fewer than 1,000 yards in his entire career. So you do kind of have a floor that you're working with, and he obviously doesn't miss many games either. So. Can't hate on that at all. For me, it's Tyler Lockett. I love this guy. I feel like every year he gets underdrafted. He's been the wide receiver 16 or better each of the past 5 seasons. And he put up production pretty much on par with DK Metcalf last season. So I don't see a big reason to fade him right here. I know Smith and Jigba is coming in, and that's a step up from Marquise Goodwin and D. Eskridge and whoever they had playing that wide receiver 3 role last year. But when you have a guy like Lockett who is kind of locked into that number 2 role regardless, usually you see the guys under them are the ones that get their target shares disrupted. So I think the tight end target shares might go down. I think they'll continue not to really throw too much to the backs, but either way, I think you're getting a pretty good floor ceiling combo here with Tyler Lockett, who has, again, finished as a top 16 wide receiver in each of the past 5 years. So really like Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 32. I got him wide receiver 26.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you beat me to the outline. I think he is the clear value in this entire tier. It seems like he's always too cheap, and this year's no different. So yeah, sign me up for Lockett at 32. Really no question marks with this game. And there's a lot of guys in this range I think we could poke holes in, but Lockett isn't one of them. I think he's a steal at wide receiver 32.
Yeah, like I think so. Marquise Brown at 34, in the games that he's healthy, he should average a higher finish than that. But there are questions. He is a pretty slight guy. So there are questions just about how can he stay healthy, being that number 1 wide receiver. But I think he has some upside. And Christian Kirk at wide receiver 29 is interesting because I have him a lot closer to Ridley as of now as well. So I think he could beat that as well. But for the most part, I think Lockett is really the guy that sticks out for me. All right, we'll talk about the guys who are kind of fading at the end, go through all the tiers, but let's continue and just go to this wide receiver 4 tier. So that's the guys in that 37 to 48 tier. And those are, so you got George Pickens at 37, Kadarius Toney, 38, Smith and the Jigba at 39, Gabe Davis at 40, Brandin Cooks at 41, Cortland Sutton 42, Jordan Addison, the rookie in Minnesota, is 43, Rashad Bateman 44, Jamison Williams 45, Michael Thomas 46, Quentin Johnston 47, and then you got Elijah Moore at 48. Who do you like in this tier?
So I think my favorite wide receiver from this range is Jordan Addison, wide receiver 43. I have him as my wide receiver 36, so I'm a bit higher. There's really no weakness to his game. He can line up in the slot or outside. He can win downfield. He is a bit smaller, which is why he's getting compared to Devonta Smith. I know there were some concerns about Devonta Smith when he entered the league, but he's blown those out of the water. So I think being compared to Devonta Smith is a good thing. And the Vikings probably took Addison in the first round to become their number 2 wide receiver immediately, and sort of replace the Adam Thielen role. And Addison, to be fair, like he does profile as a solid number 2 receiver at the NFL level. I don't think of him as being some like alpha number 1. So having to play alongside Justin Jefferson could be a plus. Defenses are going to have to pay attention to Jefferson, Hawkinson. So Addison could see a ton of open targets this season. I just think he has a pretty high floor ceiling up, combo in this range where there's a lot of guys in this range I am concerned about, but Addison isn't one of them. We haven't seen Addison play a snap in the NFL, so I guess that's sort of the concern. But either way, I think he has a really high floor in this landing spot in Minnesota.
Yeah. You've been talking Addison all off season, and he's a really good route runner. So that should be a plus. I'm pretty in line with him for now. I just want to see, make sure that everything, he has a good camp and he's on par to actually be that number 2. But yeah, I could see him moving up for me if he does. I'll give you one, and I know you got another one, so we could close on that one. But I'll go with Brandin Cooks going outside the top 40. I think he should be in the mid 30s. I have him wide receiver 36, and I also have Michael Gallup a lot higher than ADP too, who we'll talk about in a bit. But Brandin Cooks is still going to be his age 30 season. He's had 1,000 or more yards in 7 of his 9 seasons up until this point. And back in 2021, Dallas had 3 top 48 wide receivers, and it could have been even more because Gallup missed time that year as well. So it was kind of him and Wilson, and they still had 3 top 48 guys. So I don't think the floor is really much lower than this, whereas I think the ceiling is significantly higher because Dallas, no Dalton Schultz this year. The tight end may not be as big of a part of the game plan. So I think Dallas can easily, if any team, outside of, I guess, Cincinnati can support, 3 top 40 wide receivers. It's a team like Dallas, and Cooks doesn't really have to do much to beat his ADP here at wide receiver 42. But I think he's being overlooked here just because had the down year in Houston, didn't really want to be there. Also struggled with some injuries. But let's not forget, like, this guy is one of the more consistent guys in the league, and just Dallas is going to be a massive step up from what he's had in Houston these past couple of years. So like Brandin Cooks to bounce back and like him outside this top 40 here.
Yeah, I have him pretty high too. He's my wide receiver 35. It is weird that the public's kind of sleeping on him. Like you said, last year in Houston, it was a down year, but he's disgruntled all season. And I question if he was giving 110% week in, week out. So, I give him a boost because of that. But like you said, when it comes to the Cowboys, they're going to be missing Dalton Schultz. And I don't think any one of these tight ends will even come close to replicating his, production. So that's going to be just extra targets for the wide receivers. And Cooks should be, the number 2 receiver. So getting him, outside of the top 40 seems like a steal.
Yeah. All right. And who, I know you like one other guy in this range. Who is it?
I'm sticking with my boy Gabe Davis here at wide receiver 40. Everyone, they're acting like he was some mega bust last year. And while I'll be the first to admit he definitely fell short of my expectations last year. He also just wasn't as consistent as I would have liked. His ADP was wide receiver 26, and he finished as a wide receiver 27. So, let's be real here. He finished pretty close to where he was being drafted. And he had a few things just going against him last season. He suffered that ankle injury in practice after week 1, forced him to miss week 2. And then he just played through it, which was great for our fantasy teams because we want guys to play, but he wasn't 100%. In fact, he didn't have a full practice again until week 5. So he probably really wasn't 100% until after the week 7 bye. And then if you remember, Josh Allen had that elbow injury in week 9, where he played through that as well. But he seemed less willing to throw downfield for a few games after that injury, which definitely hurt Gabe Davis. So there was, quite a stretch there where we weren't seeing peak Davis or Josh Allen. So while you going forward, he's going to be pretty inconsistent, just mainly due to the fact that he operates as, a downfield threat. But you can get him outside the top 36 right now. And in fact, you can get outside the top 40. So I like the value we're getting on him as being, the number 2 target and one of the best offenses in football. So I think he's a great investment in best ball at wide receiver 40, like starting my bench and redraft leagues with him. And again, he's another player with DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Titans gives us clarity on a player like Gabe Davis, where we don't think, DeAndre Hopkins might land there and we have to move him way down our board. Right now, it looks like Gabe Davis will be entering this season as the Bills' number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah, he's back up to my wide receiver 32. So
nice.
I'm right with you. I do agree. I think there will be some inconsistency there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we kind of talked last pod about, really trying to get, not just 2, but 3 wide receivers before that top 24 is out. I think you can afford to wait on running back a lot more this year. I think there's just not as much of a teardrop, as you go through these, first 6, 7, 8 rounds at running back as there is at wide receiver. So I think Davis still, should play most of the snaps. He's still their best blocking wide receiver, was in on 93% of the routes per game and in games that he played last year. So I think you should see more of the same. And Buffalo should go to more of a, they'll probably play more 2 tight end looks, but that shouldn't affect Diggs or Davis in any way. That would just affect, the Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, those guys. So like Gabe Davis as well. All right, let's jump to the guys outside the top 48. Who do you like in that range?
So I'm going with one guy here, and it's Van Jefferson at wide receiver 68. And to be clear, 2022 was a lost season for Van Jefferson. He had multiple knee surgeries in the offseason, wasn't able to even make his season debut until week 8. And they really babied him. He eased into action. And he only played 3 games with Matthew Stafford last year. However, weeks 12 through 18, once he was closer to 100%, he averaged a 98% routes run rate, managed to post the wide receiver 42 score over the final 7 games. Now, granted, Cooper Kupp was out, but, he was playing with John Wolford and Baker Mayfield on our center. So it was a pretty big drop off at quarterback. He scored that game-winning touchdown when we were at that Thursday night game against the Raiders. But yeah, heading into the season, he should be a lock to be the number 2 receiver again this year, while the others kind of battle over who's going to be the number 3. So he should be the number 3 target in a pass-heavy offense, who should be involved in way more trailing game scripts this year as the defense is really falling apart. So he was the wide receiver 35 in 2021. So we already know he has wide receiver 3 upside when he's healthy in this offense. He's playing the final year on his rookie contract. So, I expect him to be very focused on increasing his own stock. So he seems like an absolute steal in this wide receiver 68 range. A lot of these other guys, they kind of need an injury or something to really hit. But with Van Jefferson, he just needs to do his thing, stay healthy, and he could, eke out wide receiver 3 kind of flex value at times. So I think he's by far the biggest steal in this range.
Yeah, and there's actually I like quite a few guys in that range, and I think the last tier we talked about, that that wide receiver 4 tier, 37 to 48, that's the tier I don't really like many of the guys. That's the tier where I'm kind of going to use that pick on a quarterback or running back or maybe even a tight end if I don't have one. But once it starts evening out, I still see a few guys here that should, just based on playing time alone, should beat these ADPs. And I think Jefferson's one of them. And I've gotten a lot of him in best ball, especially because I do think he's one of those, kind of downfield receivers that he'll be kind of hard to predict, but the number should be there at the end of the year. Another one of those guys, Michael Gallup, he's wide receiver 65 right now. He was a top 50 wide receiver in points per game in 2020 and 2021. And before that ACL injury, he averaged 15 yards a catch, a little over 8 yards a target, and about 53 yards per game. And then after the ACL injury last year, his yards per catch went from 15 down to 10.9. His yards per target dropped 2.5 yards from 8.3 to 5.7, and his yards per game from 53 to 30. So I think now that he's another year removed from that ACL injury, he will be a top 3 receiver here in Dallas. There's no Dalton Schultz. I think he is even more undervalued than Brandin Cooks.
Yeah, I have him wide receiver 55, and that's just assuming the Cowboys are a little bit more run heavy this year in a frustrating way. But wide receiver 65 is a joke, just because Dalton Schultz is leaving behind a ton of targets that these other tight ends won't be able to pick up. So a guy like Gallup should be a beast this year, and he's probably going to line up more in the slot, right, with Cooks there. See more easier throws, I should say, whereas last year he was more of just a deep threat and pretty inconsistent. But heading in the season 100% healthy, and could be at times the number 2 target in this offense. So yeah, I love him here as well.
Yeah, the coaches are talking about he was running too many go routes last year.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I agree.
Yeah, low. If he gets away from some of those low percentage routes, it should make him more consistent. So, Gallup's easily a guy. I see him. He has like wide receiver 3 upside. So,
I
think he's way undervalued. Another guy, Nico Collins, and this is more of an upside bet, but I think he's the best bet to lead Houston in receiving. He's still just 24 in year 3, 22% targets per route last season. So that's pretty good. And 6'4", 215, I think he's also the most likely Texan receiver to, get the touchdowns. I don't know if there'll be a ton of them with CJ Stroud in year 1, but I do think they'll be more competitive. I don't think they're trying to tank anymore. They're in a pretty weak division. And, Mechie is, he missed his entire rookie year. So, and Robert Woods is kind of past his prime. So I think Collins is a good bet to lead this team in receiving. So I like taking a shot at him at wide receiver 59. What do you think of Nico?
Oh yeah. I mean, I loved him last year. I was probably a year too early. So I'll let you take him here, but yeah, love the upside, especially with, CJ Stroud, who is really just more of a pocket passer. He's not going to be scrambling that much. So I think a guy like Nico could benefit. And this is going to turn into the Dalton Schultz pod, I think. But, Dalton Schultz is probably the favorite to be the number 1 target in this offense. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Nico Collins. I think he has a ton of upside, especially in the red zone. Like, I think he maybe not this year, bet for 10 plus touchdowns, but he does have that kind of physique and playing style. So yeah, I think he's a solid play this late in the draft.
Yeah, and a couple more, Romeo Doubs and Alec Pierce, both year 2 guys. Doubs, I just think he's going to be locked into a pretty big role in Green Bay as that number 2 receiver. He averaged a target on 21% of his routes last year, so that's above average. And then Alec Pierce, going into year 2, the offense should be more vertical under Shane Steichen. And if Richardson is the quarterback, obviously I don't think the pass volume will be there for the team. I'd rather take a shot on Pierce at wide receiver 66 than Michael Pittman, who's still going inside the top 30, because these year 2 guys tend to take a step forward. So I think they could be a little bit more equal than people expect. And this Colts passing game, not really investing too much, but I think Pierce is a little bit intriguing here. Going outside the top 60 at wide receiver, another guy who should be playing kind of like Doubs, probably is going to play 85-90% of the snaps every game as that wide receiver too. Any thoughts on either of those guys?
Oh yeah, no, I love the Pierce call because I think Pittman's going too high, especially if Anthony Richardson starts 10 plus games this year, which I think he will. But a guy like Pierce, he could offer value this late. Because Richardson does have a big arm. He could throw it deep. And there's a chance Gardner Minshew ends up starting 5 or more games this year for whatever reason, injury, Richardson isn't ready. In that scenario, I mean, Pierce is even more valuable because Minshew's going to throw it more. He can throw downfield. So I think Pierce has some sneaky upside just in terms that, Minshew might end up starting more games than we think right now. So there's a lot of paths, at least, for Pierce to hit at wide receiver 66.
All right, what about guys we are fading? Anyone from the wide receiver 3 tier on that you're just not really touching at ADP that you think is not going to beat it?
Yeah, the guys that stuck out immediately were the last 2 on the wide receiver tier when you read them off: Treylon Burks and Jahan Dotson. Treylon Burks is pretty obvious. The Titans just landed DeAndre Hopkins, so his value takes a hit. It'll probably take a week or 2 for ADP to catch up, but I'm guessing he'll be in the mid 40s. Now, still has a ton of upside, but that's a massive hit for Treylon Burks. Jahan Dotson, I love the talent, but his rookie season was really fueled by touchdowns. So I think he's due for regression there. Plus, he's just in a run-heavy offense with Sam Howell likely under center, and we were kind of talking about how good Terry McLaurin is and how much the offense holds him back. So I just don't see Jahan Dotson really overcoming that to draft him as a wide receiver 3. Kadarius Toney, while I love the upside, he could just never stay healthy. So I'm not completely avoiding him, but I don't want to go overboard because, he's just way too risky at this point for me. And then the biggest fade for me is still Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
Being ranked like he was playing to start the season. He's not. He's suspended the first 6 games. So it's going to be really tough for him to hit ADP. I will be drafting him next year. Hopefully he's going into the season neither hurt nor suspended. I love the talent, but just heading into the season where there's still some question marks on how involved he'll be. And the fact that he's suspended 6 games means I am not really drafting him at all where he's going right now.
Yeah, Jameson Williams, I mean, that's the top guy. There's no way.
You get Brandin Cooks right there.
I know exactly. Like, you can pretty much get Brandin Cooks in the same spot. Like, I have Jameson Williams factoring in the missed games. I have him as my wide receiver 94. Like, he hasn't come close. I don't know how people are getting to 46.
I have him 64, and I thought that was ridiculous. 94.
Wow. Well, because so we don't know. Like, last year, he was like the number 4 or 5 receiver. Now, could he be the number 2 this year? Yes, but that's not a guarantee. Like, they might continue using him as a situational deep threat, especially since he's now missed, his last, like, he's essentially missing like the beginning of the season, the last 2 years. So it's not like he's had a ton of time to develop. Yeah. So, like, I still don't have him just like locked in as that wide receiver 2. Right. There is some risk there. And I hate fading guys, year 2 guys. I think they usually take a leap, but there's just almost I just don't see any way for him really to find his way to anything close to that ADP. So Jameson Williams is the big one for me. Totally agree with Kadarius Toney. I just don't see him staying healthy. And even if he does, I mean, I don't think he's a guy that plays, every snap like a usual, like a number one wide receiver typically does. And I don't even know if he'll be the number one. I mean, I know we heard some buzz in camp about it, but realistically, I don't think they believe that they can play this guy for, upwards of 80% of the snaps per game. So I think it'll be a committee, and he'll have some, some big games, but he'll also have some duds. So wide receiver 38, I think is way too rich. And then one more going backwards, Deontay Johnson at wide receiver 26. Not a big fan of there either. We've heard Pittsburgh and Matt Canada say, we're trying to be a conservative offense. We're not really trying to throw the ball a ton. And I think you are going to see an improvement from George Pickens entering year 2. So, and like I said, I think we talked about this on another pod, but I just don't know if we can kind of look at Deontay as that same guy he was with Big Ben necessarily, because it is a little bit of a different situation now with Kenny Pickett here. So I just see a lot of downside with Deontay. I do think he'll rebound in the touchdown category a little bit, but when he's going ahead of guys like Tyler Lockett, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, I just don't think he should be going above those guys. So Deontay is another guy that I really don't want to touch at ADP. Now, if he drops, 6-7 spots, maybe I think it'll be more in line. But as of now, he's still a little too high for me at 26, going just one spot behind Drake London. I think there's a bigger gap there.
Do you have Pickens ranked ahead of Deontay right now?
Nah, but I have them a little closer.
Closer than 80.
Yeah, they're both in the mid 30s. Like I think Pickett's 37 and Deontay's like 33 or something like that. So it's just I have Deontay kind of at the more toward the end of that wide receiver 3 tier, whereas ADP has him a little more toward the top part of it. So yeah, just a little concerned about his production this year. All right, that is going to do it for our wide receiver number 3 pod here on the Fantasy Flex. Be sure to check out our fantasy rankings for 2023 up at actionnetwork.com. We also have all of our other episodes out as well. The quarterback, tight end, running back 1, running back 2, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 2. We'll be back next week. But until then, you can find Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon. And we're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.